I'd like to introduce Mr. Raymond Dunton from Navajo Ministries. He's going to do our invocation tonight. If you could all please stand.
Dear God, thank you so much for this opportunity we have to gather here today with the best interest in mind for those that we have an opportunity to serve. Thank you for each of these people that are here, that have been elected and chosen to represent. Father, we pray that there would always be a voice, and that voice would be heard and understood, and that all things would be considered, every issue, every challenge, with a spirit of unity within the bond of peace. So we pray for understanding, for revelation, for ingenuity, that so collectively, that these hearts and souls would come together with one mind, and that is to serve the best way they can, the best interest of these people. Father, we pray that tonight, that this would make a difference as we continue to move forward in a way that is going to serve well and serve strong the people of Aztec. We want to thank you in advance and what you're going to accomplish. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. David, would you like to lead us in the pledges tonight?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and to see a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Okay, Carla, would you please call the roll? Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
All right, our next item is our agenda approval. If there are any items that do not meet the approval for being heard on this evening's agenda, now is the time to remove those items. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the agenda as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this evening's agenda as given. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Next up, we have two presentations. Our first one is our FY17 annual audit report with our Finance Director, Kathy Lamb.
Actually, I'm not doing the presentation. Danny Martinez with Carly.
Oh.
And you will do the
My apologies.
presentation of our FY17.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. And you all have the presentation with you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Commissioners. As Kathy said, my name is Danny Martinez. I'm an audit partner with Carriggs & Ingram, your auditing firm, and I'm out of our Albuquerque office. And I'm going to be spending the next 10 minutes or so just giving you a brief overview of the audit for the year ended June 30, 2017. As you can see, we're already here 10 months into the next fiscal year, so some of the things related to financial performance and even some of the findings, they may have already been resolved by the city, but this is one of the requirements of the State Auditor's Office is to be here and to present to you as those charged with governance a few things in relation to the audit. So this audit was for the period from July 1, 2016 to June 30, 2017. And you all have packets that you're provided in front of you. This is the same packet that we presented in more detail in February 12th with an exit conference with Kathy. And as you can see in the page 2 in the top left, a little bit of a timeline of the audit. This audit went a little longer than it should have and than it has in the past. The statutory deadline for submission for cities is December 15th. There was some turnover in some key management positions during the time frame of the audit, which caused us to submit our auditor's report on January 30th of this year. So we were about six weeks late, But working with Kathy, we have a plan in place to where that was just a one-year thing to where we'll get it submitted by the statutory deadline. This year, we already have plans to do some procedures before year end, before June 30th. So that'll just be a one-year thing. On the bottom left, we have our independent auditor's report. So in your financial statement, there are 3 reports that are ours. The first one is a report on your financial statements, and what we gave there is an unmodified opinion, or that's the best opinion available. So what that says there in your 140-page financial statement document, with all those numbers in there, we were able to gather and obtain sufficient audit evidence for all those numbers to feel comfortable with those numbers that are presented in the city's financial statements. In addition, we have 2 other reports. One is a report on internal controls over financial reporting, or it's called the Yellow Book report. That's usually where you see any types of findings in relation to the controls in the city, and I'll touch on those briefly here in a moment. We have 4 items that we want to present to you in that topic. The other report that we have is because you spent more than $750 in federal money during that period that we talked about, you also had to have a single audit. And so we looked at your clean water grant, and we performed an audit on direct and material compliance requirements in relation to that grant, and we report on that grant. And for that grant, we are again giving an unmodified opinion, saying that you complied in all material respects with all of the direct and material compliance requirements. We have one item that was noted that we will discuss with you all. Our responsibility is, of course, to form an opinion as to whether those financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, and to give that reasonable assurance. So what we say is, with a city of your size, with your governmental funds, your utility activity, it's a lot of transactions that you go through every year. So we don't look at every single transaction, but we go through based off of risk, based off of the dollar amount of these transactions, and we perform procedures in order to give that that opinion on your financial statement. We're also required to communicate significant matters in relation to the audit, which is what we're doing here today, what we did at February 12th in more detail. So that's kind of the gist of that. Page 3 is some financial statement highlights, and like I said, because the time period is July 1 to June 30, 2017, I'll just go ahead and leave those for you if you have any questions about them. My email address is in the back, but really what it shows is that you all had significant amount of construction projects going on during that time frame, a lot of infrastructure projects going on, and we highlighted a couple of areas where we spent a little bit more time on. Now, I'm not saying that anything was wrong in any of those areas, but your accounts receivable and your capital assets were areas where you have a lot more transactions, a lot more volume. So we spent a little bit more time on there, so we just highlight a few of the things that we did in relation to those areas to get comfort if you all are interested. Page 4, it relates to your single audit, and so like I told you all, we tested your Clean Water State Revolving Fund grant. We look at a few things. Did you spend the money correctly? Were the costs associated with that grant reasonable? Were you requesting money only for things that you spent related to that grant? The procurement related to those, and then the required reporting. So we go through, and those are the types of things that we looked at in relation to that grant. We have one item that we noted that I'll discuss with you here in a minute. Pages 5 through 7 is just the required communication in accordance with auditing standards. Again, I'll leave those for you all to look over, but just the things I want to make sure that city commissioners are aware of in relation to the audit and things that we're required to report to you all. Lastly, I'll go ahead and close pages 8 and 9 in regards to communication with the governing body of findings that were identified in the audit. Really briefly, there's 3 levels of findings. The highest level is what's called a material weakness. That's such that internal controls that you have in place could cause a material misstatement to occur. We had none of those to report during your audit, so at the highest level of finding, none of those were reported. The second level is things that are still significant enough that those charged with governance would need to know about, and we have 2 of those presented in there in relation to controls over electric department inventory, just the documentation in regards to the controls over inventory for the electric department, as well as preparation of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So when you spend federal money, just keep the tracking of how much you spend of federal sources versus state versus local, those types of sources. There was just a small adjustment needed in that area. The third reported finding is related to that audit of your federal awards, and whenever you enter into contracts with the vendor over $25,000, there's a requirement in the federal guidance to look at the suspension and debarment, or to put something in the contract in regards to making sure that whoever you're doing business with was not suspended or debarred. We didn't see any instances where anyone we worked with was suspended or debarred. The recommendation there is for strengthening the controls around looking for those types of vendors whenever you enter into those arrangements. Lastly, you have the two final findings. These would not be reported in your financial statements except for the fact that you are under the purview of the State Auditor's Office in New Mexico. They have a stricter standard than other states, and normally these would just have been in a letter and would not have even showed up in the report. But because it's under the State Auditor's Office, we're required to report everything that we find, no matter how significant. So these two fall in that lowest level. The first one is pertaining to the audit not being submitted by December 15th. And as I told you already, we are already taking steps on our end and with your finance team to make sure that is submitted on time in 2018. The second one is related to the travel and per diem. That's the Travel and Per Diem Act is something we have to test with the state audit rule. And we noticed that the rate was off by about $1.50 from what the approved rate was. So that's just something, hey, heads up here, the rate does fluctuate and does change. Make sure that you're changing the rate as it goes along. We had one finding that was from 2016, and we tested that, and that was resolved in regards to utility revenue. So the one good thing that you see here is what the state auditor is looking at is, are there any repeat findings? And if there are findings, are they just happening for 1 year, and then are you doing the steps necessary to resolve them, within a year's time? Out of respect for your time, that is, a very broad overview. I know that Mr. Mayor, Pro Tem, you all are new, and so if you have any additional questions in regards to the June 2018 audit process, which is here to begin in the next couple of months, my email and my phone number is on that back page on City Commissioners as well. It's on page 10. So if you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, just feel free to give me a call, or I'd be happy to answer them now. We will work on setting up an entrance conference for next year's audit here sometime either in June or in July.
Okay. Yes, sir. Did anybody have any questions? Or anything? All right. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Thanks for your time. Okay. Our next presentation is Aztec Municipal School District Superintendent Kirk Carpenter regarding resource officer and potential closing of Zia Street at Aztec High School campus. Welcome, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you.
I believe he's accompanied by his own relief pitcher.
Got relief here, so.
All right.
And I'll probably need it. So, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, appreciate the time, and I'll try to make it as short as possible. I know years ago we approached about closing Zia Street, and I think at that time I know Pollard was probably a dirt road, so it was unfeasible to probably think about that. And I apologize, I don't have pictures for everybody. I have some different pictures I brought you, but some are just aerial views of our campus, and to try to give you some ideas of what we're thinking. Obviously, we have different things contingent upon whether we can move forward with this, and I know that's going to take some time to be considered. But there's two proposals we'd like for you to look at. I realize there's no action tonight, but one is for the city to pay for another school resource officer. Currently, we have one that we split. What we're coming to ask tonight is that you consider paying for one in full. It's not something that is not done. In fact, it's a pretty regular thing that cities pay for school resource officers in full. It's done all over the state. As a school district, we know how our funds are, we know how your funds are. But we also know that in today's day and time, that, and obviously with the tragedy we had, that school security with armed security is something that's necessary. And so we would come to you and ask you, as you're putting your budget together, that you consider that. The caveat with that is we do not in any way, shape, or form Do we want to sacrifice Chief Hill's budget? And I realize it may all be one budget, but we are not coming to say cut an officer of his and make that officer a school resource officer. The school resource officer we are asking for would be one that we would house specifically at Aztec High School. That high school campus is a beautiful campus, but as we all know, it's a spread out campus. And having an armed officer there full-time that we feel like is something that is necessary. We've had an SRO. We've always tried to house the SRO at that campus, but we know that's also a challenge when you have 6 other schools. And in no way, shape, or form do we want to set up our other schools by trying to just have an officer that has to float. Since the incident, obviously, we've been able to get more security there because of some emergency funding. That's something as we go into our budget, we're going to have to change things across the district. Having more security and those types of things is not an option. Never has been, as far as safety goes. It's never been something we haven't had in our district, but obviously we all know why we can't look back on what we're trying to do with security. And that not just security at Aztec High School. But we do come to you asking to consider that as we go forward. And like I said, it's not uncommon. Cities paying for school resource officers and putting them on school campuses. You know, schools are the center of the community and that type of thing. So in the letter, I've tried to outline that. A school district our size having 2 school resource officers is not in any way something that is something that's over the top. There's districts our size that have 3, even more. And again, with society, the number of shootings that have occurred even after our tragedy, we just have to look across the country at the sad state society's in and what's happening with school tragedies. So I would stand for any questions on that first topic or allow Mr. Lane if you'd like to add anything on that.
Honorable Mayor, Honorable Commissioners, my name is Ryan Lane. As Mr. Carpenter indicated, I am a member of the Aztec School Board. I've been for a few years. I also wear a different hat as well. I'm an Aztec citizen, born and raised here. My wife and I own a home here. We own a few commercial properties and a couple businesses. And so I mention all that to state that we are very vested in this community. And I understand that we're here essentially asking for the city to pony up additional money. And I realize what state our economy is and really what that means for you having to make those tough decisions. But the reality is that our school was built as an educational facility. Those schools were not built with the idea that we had to defend against lethal force. Unfortunately, that's a reality that we now have to deal with. So we all hope that what happened never occurs again, obviously. But hope also is not a strategy. And so we're looking as a school district, what are some practical ways that we can make a difference now? And we believe this is one of those issues. So part of the problem is, and as Mr. Carpenter highlighted, Chief Hill and his department have done a wonderful job, so please don't take this as any slight against him and his department. They've been great. But the reality is let's say we get a call at Kugler Middle School for, some kid is having trouble, or let's say they get, marijuana is found on them, for example. So our SRO would get called to the junior high. The problem is now the high school doesn't have any certified, trained police officer. And so our thought is if we could have that additional SRO who would be stationed solely to AHS. That way if there's another call that comes out, that's great. The floater can go and handle that. But then we also always have somebody on campus, on the ground at all times. And then I think, obviously during the summertime, that SRO could be assigned to whatever beat Chief Hill needs help with. And Mr. Carpenter and I also spoke about the school district being able to help with some one-time costs, such as if it was a new hire, for example, and that person had to go through the academy, that might be something that the school district could partner with the city in paying for, or if we had to equip a motor vehicle, those kind of things that we can use our mill funding for. I know the school district would be open to doing that, but I think the reality is if you were to take the pulse of citizens and ask them, would you be willing to have this additional hire in your city government? I think across the board you're going to find support. And again, this is, I think, just an immediate and practical way that we can provide some more safety up at our high school. Thank you.
And I think Mr. Lane, obviously, he's well-spoken. I know when he went out to college, he still wrote me as a former coach. And I always took the letters and had to get the dictionary out. But I think he said it best. It's without saying that it's a new normal at our high school. I know we had students, I think some are in the audience tonight. I know they're in the audience. They went out and represented us very well. And they went to Washington, and I was very proud of them as I watched them on television. It was sad we had to watch them on television, but it's a new normal to high school, and it's a new normal for our community, and so we are here because of that. In many respects, we'd probably be here anyway, but it is absolutely something that is necessary. We've added new security. We've added police officers up there because we care about our kids. We want our kids to feel comfortable as possible. But when you watch the interviews on TV and you listen to our kids about how they just don't feel the same, it breaks your heart. And we need to answer the call. And we're going to do everything we can as a school district, but we do come to you as a city because there's a lot of places, Mr. Collins says it all the time, there's Virginia Tech, Texas Tech, New Mexico Tech, but there's only one Aztec. And so we come to you tonight just to ask you to consider this. And again, we know what budgets are like. But we have our kids in our future. So that's the first presentation on that piece, and I, again, would stand for any questions on that first piece.
Can I ask just a question real quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
When I'm looking at this, and I just barely got it to read it, to me it looked like you're wanting the city to pick up 100% of the SRO. But this doesn't say 2. You were talking about 2, but I see nowhere in here it talks about 2.
Chief Hill, and just to clarify, we have one current SRO. We're asking for one more because we have one that we split. We're asking for one additional.
Because it wasn't, to me it wasn't clear. I just
Yes,
wanted to
sir.
make sure you were looking for a second one, not just one. Okay.
So to
we
continue with
have
the split costs and then add an additional with the
we're
city
asking
picking
for,
up the...
Yes, sir.
Right.
One additional. We have one right now. We're asking for a second one
Right.
that would be
Strictly.
strictly picked up by the city. The one we have right now is a 60-40 split. I apologize. And I just got that to the chief. I just wrote it today. I was a little bit late on my homework, so.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes,
just, a comment. I think it's going to be real important for all of us to maybe talk to our legislators and stuff about the back-to-work thing with the para. I think it's going to be real important. I know it's been talked about, but this is a perfect way that some of those retired officers could come back if they can ever get it lined out to where they could come back and not mess up their retirement. They're already trained, they're experienced, and it would be the perfect answer for all of our schools and all over the country if we can ever get that ironed out. So it may be something that maybe we need to start talking to our legislators about.
Mayor and Commissioner Stipe, if I may, I've already testified once this in the interim, and I'm going back again. And I will tell you that Chief Hill was there as well, and we're doing that. And you're right. We're not going to stop at just one SRO. We're going to find ways as well, whether it's school marshals or whatever, to find ways to get more armed personnel on campus. I think everybody understands how I feel about the teacher issue. I'm not going to get into that tonight. But we do need to do that, and it's sad we need to do that. But we are lobbying our legislators to change the laws, to allow those people that are trained to come on our campuses and protect our kids and our staff. And I'm going back down on the 23rd. And we are doing exactly that. There's a community task force that involves legislators. Chief Hill is involved with that. And we appreciate all the work he is doing. And I will tell you, nobody's working as hard as he is. He's burning the highways up, and we're great partners in that. And just know that we are working hard for that. And I'm not going to stop, because we do owe that to our kids and staff. For that very same thing, we need to find ways to change the laws, and the lawmakers may probably change their phone numbers and their emails, because we're burning them up for that very reason. So in addition to this, there are those things that we also want to do. This is just one part of a bigger plan, and it's one little piece of the pie, if you will. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, moving on to the second proposal, which is one of talking about Zia Street. And I apologize, I should have got the diagrams over, but I knew that he would be able to just do his magic. Zia Street, and this is not unique for a high school to have a street run through its campus. But at any given point during our day, we could have as much as a third of our high school population across the street. And if you look at this diagram on the bottom part, you'll see that that's basically our gymnasium, and up on top is where the rest of our campus is. Zia Street basically is the street that runs and dissects our campus. And the idea that we have is to look at closing Zia Street. And what we'd like to do is close it right here. What that would do for us is many things. It would allow us to secure our campus and plan out short-range and long-range plans. Right now, if you look at Aztec High School, it's a college campus. It's spread out. We could put, honestly, 6 to 7 security guards on that campus, but we have openings all over. Now, we have fencing that is fenced all the way up, and our practice fields right here, there's a lot of fencing around our campus. But there's a lot of openings, and there's honestly no way to secure campus. With the new ID badges that are there, that's not real popular with some of our students, but that's okay. Inconvenience is okay when it comes to safety. But there's really no way to secure that campus because our students enter the student parking lot, but they can drive through here, they can walk through here. The young man that entered our campus was able to get on the campus. I'm not saying that even that day having the SRO there would have stopped it. It wouldn't have. However, securing a campus and being able to get only a certain number of entrances can absolutely help in who comes on and where they're getting on. Closing Zia is a first step of allowing us then to plan what we do on the rest of the campus. Without being able to close Zia, in many respects, then we have to change our plans as far as what we'd like to do with the rest of the campus. What the audience doesn't have that you do have is a second drawing. On that second drawing, there's outlined around the campus orange. That orange represents what could possibly be new fencing. We want to balance the openness without making our schools like a prison. However, we are sensitive to what we have to do as far as controlling who comes on our campuses and where. If you look at all the new construction in education today, they're controlling where people enter, where they come on, how they get on, and where they go. So with Aztec High School, if we could shut Zia, you could literally station security guards in so that people coming into the parking lot, the student parking lot, have stickers on their car. If not, they're stopped. As students enter the campus, they enter the campus right here, IDs, they're stopped. So you could house 2 people out there and take care of controlling that side of the campus. We could control the other end of the campus with fencing, with one entrance, and literally control the front of the campus right in here by taking out bridges and putting in one bridge with fencing. But again, it's all contingent upon being able to close Zia Street. If we can't control Zia Street, then again, this is wide open. And it's difficult because if it's an open street, we can't stop pedestrians. We can't stop pedestrian traffic. People can come up here and park, walk down, and it's a matter of, it's just way too difficult. Many years ago when we approached this idea, it was talked about building a little overpass over the road. It was about probably a $20,000 project. Schools have done it, but where they've done it is when you're talking about roads like Main Street. roads like 516 where there's truly traffic issues. This road is not heavy traveled. Don't get me wrong, would it be an inconvenience for some people that live up here? Absolutely. But what we have now is Blanco and a paved pollard where people can get around. And again, we're talking about safety. Safety, not just because of the incident, but because, again, where school safety is across our country. And we would be here. So this is our second proposal of closing Zia. I realize it'd probably take a study. We're not opposed in helping with that. We understand that we would have to own some of the expenditure if it was to be closed. Our first option and our first request is to completely close it. If it can't be closed completely, then our second option would be to close it during school hours, that we would have a fence or a gate to be able to close that thing during school hours so that we could, again, try to close it and secure entrances during the school day. Then it would be opened up during the weekend and other times so that traffic could flow freely. If there's emergency issues or concerns there, we could look at building in mechanisms so that emergency vehicles could get up there quicker. But again, it would be a matter of, we feel like, even half a minute of emergency vehicles getting up to other houses in that other area on the southeast side of the campus, just to the southeast side in this area. So that's our other consideration. And again, I would turn it over to Mr. Lane.
Believe it or not, not all lawyers like the sound of their own voice, or not in love with the sound of their own voice. I don't have any comments on this issue, so thank you.
So we would stand for questions with this.
I have a question, Mr. Carpenter, and it's just kind of a general question. If Zia were to be closed, am I to assume that the campus, like lunchtime, is going to be closed as well? Is that kind of where we're heading?
We have two classes that are currently on closed campus.
I'm curious as a teacher, too, if it's going to continue to roll through seniors.
This time, because
right.
Facility-wise, we're not equipped yet to have a completely closed campus. But what this does allow us, again, is to be able to secure more entry and exit points. And with that, it gives us more ability, like I said, to secure it. Safety-wise, we can control it. We could change even what we do on the bus side. We would absolutely have to do some different fencing arrangements. The ditch itself honestly provides a pretty secure way, but we may add fencing. There's a lot of things we're looking at, we're planning. We're in the process right now. We haven't waited on things. We got a security consultant coming in with an architecture firm that we're actually working with our long-range plan, that we're hopefully going to be able to do some bonding in a few years. But a lot of what we look at, long-range and with them, will be contingent on this. And we'll also build plans contingent that we can't do it, but we're not going to throw our whole eggs in the basket on this. So as far as closing the campus completely, that would take probably some facilities because our multi-purpose room is not big enough to house the whole school with lunch, some schedule changes. That hasn't been, we haven't initiated that conversation on that.
And if you could tell me, and I'm sorry, I saw the pointer, but I'm better with verbal as opposed to, where specifically, because obviously I'm familiar with the campus, but where would you plan to start the closure of Zia? Is it above the student, or just below, like right at the edge of the student parking lot where they start to enter there? So kind of above, kind of where the ditch comes across, basically, right?
No, it actually would move it up to where you turn in to go in the upper parking lot where the gym is.
Okay.
Up that high.
Oh,
so we could still maintain egress and entrance.
Fence that whole section off, and they would come up and then have to go back down around it. Okay.
They would exit out and go left.
Right. I see.
But it would be right in this area. So we could still maintain entrance into the upper gym. Students could still exit out. With us going with closed lunch and only having two classes, the upperclassmen going out for lunch, we probably could maintain them to still get out for lunch on time. We know right now we're having a lot of them go this way, but for purposes of safety, I feel like we shut it down. You could put a guard shack here. You could even put a guard shack here honestly, because we'd shut that gate, close it off. We could have all faculty enter on the far side of campus. If we had to open that for emergencies, we could, but you could literally put a post right there with a security guard, all students park. We could actually put a permanent shack down here, check IDs coming in, have one there checking IDs coming in. So it secures the campus. It's going to be a difficult campus, and these are just preliminary thoughts.
Right,
Obviously, we're bringing in a safety person, experts. We're going to bring in, we're going to consult with our local folks as well that are the experts. You know, we're educators. We always think about safety, but we want to get with these experts as well and have them help us with this. But we've got to have ideas on what we can do on this side of campus first to make sure we can secure it, because a lot of the fencing is old as well. So some of this is going to have to come in the form of bonds, some mill money, but a lot of it's going to have to be bonding as well. And this is only one campus, but we got to address this one so we can, and we have other things we're doing at some of the other campuses. We're just here tonight to talk about this because this is a big issue.
I do. Well,
Yeah.
Mayor, I'm just trying to, and just my initial looking at it, you know, and I know there will be studies and stuff. I'm just thinking, we're going to control, or you're going to control access into the lots and then onto campus on the other side, how much of limiting the flow through traffic would really help? I guess if you're already controlling those two access points, how stopping just the flow through? I mean, I know you did mention that people can park and walk in, but if there's already going to be guards, I mean, I understand where it's going. I'm just wondering
How much that's going to help.
I feel like I can speak to that a little bit, because that's where my duty is during lunch, is right there on Zia Street. And it's a miracle that somebody hasn't gotten run over. I mean, it is an absolute miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's scary, you know, with people coming over the hill, people in a rush, you know, the sunlight in the morning, it just hits you just right where you're not. And, you know, I haven't met a teenager that's really focusing on what they're doing. They're texting, walking across the street, and not all the teachers are as assertive to say stop. Some of them are a little more passive. And so, yeah, I mean, I see that point for sure, you know, just from my own personal experience trying to herd the cats between classes and kind of thing. So yeah, it gets a little crazy sometimes.
I think the idea is if we have people coming up the street, they have a purpose.
coming up the street versus coming down from the other side.
And the purpose is they're coming to
Okay.
our campus with a reason. And if they have a reason, they have a sticker. If they don't have a sticker, we can turn them around.
Okay.
And if they're walking up the street, they have a badge. If they don't have a badge, we can turn them around. Right now, it's a public street, and
They
we
could
have
be
no
going all the way
authority.
through, or they can
Right.
turn in. Okay.
And many years ago, when I was I shouldn't say it that way. Just a couple years ago, when I was a principal, it was homecoming, and we had a threat of a drive-by. And it's your worst nightmare. But we had to walk kids across that street. And we had to contact the local police. We had to contact others to say, we need some help up here, because what do you do in that situation?
Right.
And we were able to get it handled before we had to do that. But it's these kinds of things where, worst case scenario, we could block that street down there.
Block it on the opposite side.
We could block it. We can do things, but you can secure. And I only tell that story just because that is your worst nightmare about there wasn't a day that was a principal that you didn't worry about something that happened on December 7th.
That's almost what I'm thinking. I mean, it'd be, if you're going to have one on the top side, you almost be smart to have one on the bottom, just if you needed to lock it off on the bottom, because the only people that should be going in there would be students anyway.
Well, and we understand as citizens that they may have some concerns, and so we want to honor whatever we can, and we understand emergency. What we understand is the school business, and we think we understand some of the flow through traffic.
Right.
But we also understand 850 kids a day, and whatever we can do to help with that.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're here.
Thanks.
But we want to work with you. We're not trying to drop off a problem. We want to try to bring whatever solutions we can on both issues.
Chief, you had a...
One question. You've got green on some of these? Are those going to be gates?
Yes, sir.
Or not?
Those are going to be gates. Our idea, and very
All the
very
green all the way
tentative.
around on this is going to be a gate?
Those are tentative plans. Some are already gates. Yes, sir, Mr. Chief Hill. And then the idea with the front is as we move forward is to maybe redesign the front of the school with more intentional gates that would direct more towards the front entrance. As you know, right now we have two bridges over the ditch. If we had our way, we'd like to cover the ditch and have one bridge over the ditch and really have no bridges. But that's just long range. We've been working on that idea for a while, but we'd like to have one bridge over the ditch and that directs to the office. But that right there is very tentative, but that's our plans that we've had. Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't label. It was just a very, very tentative plan and not done very well because I did it. If Mr. Banish would have done it, it would have been very clean. But that's just preliminary work, just to give you an idea of what could happen if we could close. Because once we start there, then we can start working across. So thank you for clarifying that. I didn't do a good job of explaining.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Okay. Next is citizen recognition. And I would like to first, and I kind of did a little bait and switch on you. I said you wouldn't have to stand up, and you don't have to stand up and give a presentation, but I would like you to stand up for recognition purposes and to state your names. We've got two students from Aztec. I mentioned at the last meeting that flew to Washington, D.C. Mike, you went with them, is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
Mike and Cynthia flew to Washington, D.C. for the March for Our Lives, and these are two of the four. The other two got a little stage fright. But I would like to just take a moment. First, if you could kind of introduce yourselves to our folks here tonight and to our commissioners.
Hi, I'm Laurel Pascal. I'm a junior at Aztec High School.
Hey, Laurel.
I'm Bastion Pascal, freshman at Aztec High School.
And Army JROTC cadet. Bastion's one of my students, so he has a warm spot in my heart. Okay, thank you guys. And you guys are welcome to fill me in because obviously I was not there. But I just wanted to, and I mentioned it at the last meeting, and I wanted to recognize these young folks, and I wish the other two could have made it. And I'm not in the business right now of getting on one side or the other of the issue. It's a very, very sensitive issue, of course, very volatile issue. But I just have so much respect and so much appreciation for these young people. They're everything that is right about young high school kids today. Because when I was a high school kid, and I bet you every one of us has a story about how our parents or teachers, when I was a kid, you guys got it so easy and all that kind of stuff. And it always seems to be a negative connotation towards young people today. I lived through it. I'm sure most of you all have heard this too as you grew up. But too often we're not taking time to give props to these young people for standing up for a cause they believe in. Whether it's a cause you support or not is not really, it's irrelevant. It's something they believe in, and I think it's something to be commended and to shine a light on and to give them a round of applause and just pat them on the back and all that. So I just wanted to take a moment and recognize you guys. I'm just so honored to have you here tonight, and thank you very much. You can sit down now if you want to. I don't know if anybody wanted to piggyback on that, or I don't want to steal anybody's thunder.
Good that they went. I think it's awesome.
Okay. I've got one more, and this comes with a little plaque. So if you guys want to join me, if you don't mind. This next citizen recognition is for, and I'm very sad to say, for a outgoing citizen of Aztec. Mr. David Williams is, and how long have you been back, David? I've known you for about 2 years. Yeah, so it was right after you got back. Okay. He's worked with the city, worked for the city, kind of helping with the hub office. But more important to me, and I met David because he just kind of helped himself one day and walked into my classroom, the JROTC classroom, and obviously as a retiree, and he's a vet, an Army vet. We kind of hit it off and swapped some lies and some stories, and you know, we got to work together quite a bit, at least especially the first year he was here, working with our cadets. We're volunteering to help him with projects around the city and in the community, and to kind of get a little bit of a, you know, esprit de corps kind of going in Aztec, which kind of birthed the, help me with the exact verbiage. Operation Keep Aztec Beautiful. It's turned into a Facebook group and has gained quite a bit of momentum. David was responsible for helping get donations for us to go to Washington, D.C. with our cadets this past summer. He also was instrumental in getting thousands of dollars in donations from area, you know, like home improvement stores and other businesses in the Four Corners area to help rebuild the softball field, and, you know, countless other smaller projects, always around town, always willing to lend a hand and to try and rally people around things that we may not always be able to afford to fund out of the city budget or out of other people's pockets. He was able to kind of scratch and fight for dollars and man hours, and, you know, I can't thank you enough for your time here. He's moving off to hopefully brighter things in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Marcy. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him the other night and, you know, giving our farewell. So I would like to come down and present this plaque to you, and I'll read it real quick. Presented this 10th day of April 2018 to David Williams in appreciation for your service to the citizens and city of Aztec. So if you guys wouldn't mind joining me. Okay. Steve, you didn't have any more. Did you have citizen recognition or employees?
Citizen recognition.
Okay. So we've got
Just
a
wanted
couple
to
more.
shout out to Aztec Trails and Open Space, a local trails group. They did a trail cleanup last week down in Riverside Park. We appreciate your help. I think Wallace is the only one I see back there tonight from Eight Toes.
Good job.
So thanks for that. And then Coach Monty Maxwell of the Aztec High School was named Aztec Coach of the Year, or New Mexico Coach of the Year for 1-5A as a wrestling coach. So awesome. Shout out to him as well.
Awesome.
And that's all I have there.
Okay. That's awesome. Next up is employee recognition.
And we've got a couple. I'll start first, and I'll let the chief have the floor. This is just recognition for the Aztec Police Department. Chief Mike Hill was presented to the police department from Children, Youth, and Families Department, Protective Services for 2018. They bought them lunch and all that good stuff. So, Chief, good job. Thank you. Aztec PD, thank you as well.
Yes.
So, and the chief has one. He's going to swear in a new officer tonight.
Oh,
awesome.
Ryan, come on up. we love doing this, and we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to do this and swear him in. I think he decided not to bring anybody so he wouldn't have to go through my humiliation. So we'll go ahead and do this. If you'd raise your hand. Repeat after me. I, say your name. Having been on the 10th day of April, 2018, duly appointed a police officer in and for the city of Aztec, San Juan County, New Mexico, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Mexico and the chapter and ordinances of the City of Aztec of the State of New Mexico. I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of my office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Thank you and welcome aboard. Sir.
You've seen a lot of Conroe City attorney.
All right.
And Mr. Ringer, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Moving right along. Next up is the consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda will be voted on with one motion. If any item proposed does not meet the approval of all commissioners, a commissioner may request that the item be heard under items from consent agenda. Okay, so do we have a motion from commission to approve as given the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda as given.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this evening's consent agenda as given. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. I forgot to say aye. Aye. Okay. Our next item is citizens' input. Citizens who wish to speak will sign up prior to the meeting. This is for items not otherwise listed on tonight's agenda. Do we have anybody, Carla? We do? Okay. Okay, first on our list is Mr. Gary Collins. Good evening, Mr. Collins. Please, yes. Good evening.
I live on the corner of South Mesa Verde and Zia. The irrigation ditch is right behind my house property, and the school is right across the ditch. About 2 years ago, they come in and clean the ditch out and put all their brush and trash and dirt up there in the bank right behind my place. And since that happened, everybody's beginning to think it's a trash dump. Last year, I've taken probably 6, 8, I don't know how many bags of trash that people dump there and go put it in my garbage can. I called the water district and see about them cleaning that mess up so it'd get rid of the problem. And they gave me another phone number, and I'm sorry, but I forgot what that guy's name was. I've called him 4 times, left messages, and never have been returned a call. I kind of really like to get that cleaned up so people don't think it's this place to dump their trash. You know, the brush ain't bad, but everybody else is coming in there dumping brush and then dumping their garbage bags in there and everything else. So. And we try to keep our neighborhood, you know, clean, look nice up there. So.
What was the address again?
I live on 300 South Mesa Verde, right on the corner of Zia.
Picture. Okay. I know exactly, yeah.
And by the way, Zia is a pretty wild street crossing. You definitely want to look before you go.
Agreed.
Anyways, if you can do something with that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more. is it Kenny Kohler? Mr. Kohler? Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, Commission members, my name is Kenny Kohler, and I live in the corner of Mesa Verde and Zia, and I'm concerned about one of the stop signs there, that four-way stop. It would be the northeast stop sign. Since they redid that street, that was never completed, it was never bricked in, and all the runoff water is undermining that curb, and it's going to undermine that street in that intersection if they don't post some maintenance on it. And it's been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And I've tried to get some attention to it before. And another one of my concerns, it's right there in the crosswalk where all those high school kids cross that intersection. And I suppose that 2.5 foot deep hole off the curb there, it looks kind of like a dangerous situation for those high school kids. And if I could get something done, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Okay. And I think that's it. That's 2. Okay, so we are moving on to our business items. First business item is RFP 2008-208 Wilson and Company Engineering Services Agreement, Aztec Arterial Phase 2 Amendment. Ms. Lamb?
This would be me. Mayor, Commission. I want to preface, because all the 3 business items are related to additional fees requested by Wilson. In the past, what we've asked is that the engineers actually come in and do a presentation as to why they're asking for these additional fees. This we're handling a little differently because this request actually came to the former Public Works Director several months ago. And there was no recommendation of how those fees should be handled prior to his departure. The first of the requests was submitted to him back in June of 2017. And then again in October 2017. And so because of the age of this request and where we are in these projects, we didn't feel that, or I didn't feel that it was fair to the engineers to be put in that position. Now, when they did put in a request, and it was the lack of our action in bringing this to commission. So what did happen with this is that with the departure of Mr. Watson, then staff consisting of City Manager Mueller, Ed Kotika, myself met with Wilson's staff or representatives in February to discuss their requests as well as an update on the projects to familiarize both Mr. Mueller and Ed with those projects. At that time, we asked them to review their requests because some of them that I was familiar with, I felt were out of line. So our goal had been to present this to commission by the end of February. They didn't complete that review until March, and so now we're in April. So the first request is specific, is item A, is specific to the arterial phase 2, which is the design of the last phase of the arterial. There's been, and in my staff summary, I'm not going to go through all of the detail, but the length of time since this project went out for the RFP to today, there have been significant changes, both in city staff, DOT staff, FHWA, as well as then a change in the regulations and different standards within the project. Wilson has continued to work on this and to try to keep the project moving forward. Even, again, like I said, their request was submitted to Mr. Watson back in June. They continued to work on the project without any resolution of that fee request. Their request is for $144,000. They have identified all the remaining steps that will get us through the PSNE, which is the final step that will provide NMDOT approval for this project to go to bid. The goal being that that is completed in June of 2018. We do have some other issues to complete, which is primarily the right-of-way certification, and Wilson's not involved in that piece of it. So their fees are to get us to the finish line, so to speak. The funding for this would be out of general fund, and it would be through the additional GRT that we've collected this year that has exceeded budget. That's how I feel about it. We can't finish the project without Wilson performing these services for us. They have to finish, be able to respond to any questions or comments that NMDOT may have in this final acquisition of right-of-way. If there's any types of design alternatives that need to be looked at, we have to have Wilson to be able to do that. And unfortunately, at this point, I feel like our hands are tied.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Kathy, did they amend any of their, at your request?
Not on phase 2, they didn't. On the construction management, they did. On that side, on their request, they did go back and review and amend those requests, but they felt very strongly that their fees were justified. My problem is, and that's part of why the public works engineer position has been important to us, is that that position understood the engineers. They could look at what a task was and evaluate how long it should take, what was reasonable in that. And before Mr. Watson, like I said, did not provide any recommendation prior to his departure, and I don't have the expertise to sit and look at their request and say, no, it shouldn't take this long, or yes, this is reasonable.
Mr. Mayor, and a big problem I had with it was they're asking for it now a year later, but I didn't realize they submitted it in June to Bill.
Correct. They had
he just sat on
started,
it.
and I don't know what those conversations were like. I have no idea. I didn't know until we had a couple of the hub workshops in November and December that there was an additional fee request out there. And even at that time with those first workshops, I didn't know what the amount was. Just that there was a request for additional funding.
Mr. Mayor. In some of the letters, they went into the difficulty of communication with the DOT, and they just made this sound as if, as you mentioned, there are staffing changes and miscommunication about information that and regulations that they didn't know about, and they had to go back and take care of those. Do you feel that some of those issues have been resolved so that they're on the same page?
On phase 2, on the design side of it, yes, I do. Wilson has been they've been instrumental in keeping that line of communication open with NMDOT. There's been times when we've kind of seemed to hit a roadblock with city staff and DOT, and Wilson has stepped up and made those trips to Santa Fe to get those issues resolved. Now, again, that's on the design. This is on phase 2 on the design. The problem with phase 2 is, again, the length of time that this project has gone on. And when we had picked up after phase 1B had gone out to bid, we thought we were just going to pick up phase 2 dust it off, and a year or so later, we would be out to bid. And we ended up stepping all the way back, reviewing Phase 1A that had been constructed back in 2010, reviewing 1B that was already under construction and almost finished, and then going back through Phase 2. Regulations had changed between the acquisition between BLM and the federal government, where the original right-of-way that we had acquired was something that the city initiated. We did that directly with BLM. The regulations changed and we could no longer do that. It could only be handled between FHWA and BLM. So there were just layers of regulations that have just changed, and it's just because of the length of time that it's taken the project to get to this point.
So this is dead in the water until we move this forward? This is...
I wouldn't expect them to do anything further without a resolution to their fee request on this.
So just kind of a general question. It sounds like you've already answered this, but some of the questions I guess I'm asking more, I feel fairly comfortable after reading some of the staff summary stuff and not necessarily pleased, you know, I mean, I don't think anybody is here. But just to kind of clarify that they've been working in good faith.
They have.
They've been doing at least their expectations, and in some cases more. Now, obviously, they're billing for those, but in some cases that has also helped facilitate keeping the project afloat in some ways, right?
Correct.
And we're just kind of a victim of circumstance because of straddling the changes in staff at NMDOT, regulatory changes, having to go back and meet the new regulation. So none of this stuff's grandfathered in kind of thing. We have to go back and make sure we meet the current standard.
We had, you know, if the project had been under construction or had been approved to go to construction and then regulations changed, we wouldn't have had to do anything. The problem was that we weren't, with this phase, we were not near that. And so it did. It required just a completely, DOT just stepped back and completely relooked at the project. And part of that is with the federal funding involved in it, DOT provides the oversight to us, the local public body. They're responsible for ensuring that any project that's constructed with those federal monies is constructed to those standards. And if they don't perform their oversight, their due diligence in the administration of those federal funds, FHWA doesn't come to us, they go to the state. It's not us that will be answering to it. It'll be the state who will be answering why they didn't perform their due diligence on this project. And that potentially then jeopardizes other federal funds that flow through DOT.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Does anybody?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
It's just, I mean, this has been a ongoing forever. And I know that there have been some changes on our end, but there also have been a lot of changes, like you said, through DOT and through the BLM, and as their hierarchy has changed, there was different perceptions of what needed to be done. It's just been an ongoing, continuing, and trying to jump through all the hoops for ever since Phase 1 got completed, I think. Or,
True.
You know,
True.
It's just been one change after another, it feels like. So
we have, just on Phase 1B alone, we started out with a project that we thought was just going to build the intersection based on funding we thought would be available, and then came back and were told, no, take it to this. And then they decided, no, that wouldn't fit the federal funding, take it a little bit further, and then decided that didn't need to be done, and we did what we actually ended up being constructed. But each time we received that direction was more engineering fees. It required more effort on Wilson's part, and that's just an example of what happened with 1B. Very small piece of the project compared to what Phase 2 looks like. And so then you add the time that's been involved in the project. And the reason for the time is because we didn't have the funding. And so we had to keep breaking it into smaller pieces that would fit the funding available.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on item A? Okay. So, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, move to approve Wilson and Company request for amendment of engineering fees for arterial phase 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign? Okay. Let's move on to item B. You're going to be up here for all three of them, right? Okay. Item B is RFP 2015-0444, Wilson and Company Construction Management Services Agreement, Aztec Arterial Phase 1B Amendment.
In 2015, we issued an RFP, which is a request for proposal for construction management services, with the thought that this company, whoever we retained under this RFP, would provide construction management services on multiple projects that exceeded the resources of city staff. And those specifically at that time that we knew were coming up was the construction of arterial phase 1B. We had the sewer outfall line coming up, and we knew that we had the airport project coming up, all of which have federal funding. They were all, we didn't anticipate they were going to all happen at the same time. We were hoping one would be finished before we started the other. That didn't necessarily occur. But those projects were larger, and the oversight that was needed for the construction was more than what staff was going to be able to provide. So we issued the RFP. Wilson and Company was retained, and one of the first projects that we issued a contract for was for 1B. 1B was constructed in a timely basis. We didn't have any issues too significant with the project itself. No change orders. We will have, because we're still trying to close that project out, we will have a change order that'll be the final that takes it down to actual quantities, which is about $600,000 less than what the project was bid for. This isn't necessarily due through any efforts of Wilson, but we just didn't have any problems on the project. The problems have come up with, again, with DOT. They come out and they are to do oversight, again, during the construction as well. They had changes within personnel in their office, and so things got lost. DOT came out and did some field audits, some weaknesses, some additional information was required, was submitted, and then they had a change within the personnel within DOT, and they couldn't find anything that had been submitted. So items were resubmitted. And then additional audits, and then there was an interpretation between how some testing standards should be applied as per their construction book versus what was actually done on the job. And so this is where, when I talk about that, that was a responsibility of Wilson to know what those requirements were. That's what they were charged with, was the construction management, including the testing and such. So this is one where Wilson, when they initially came in with their request for additional fees on this, they were at about $55,000. They did go back and review, because I felt strongly that some of this was because they hadn't managed the project correctly as far as keeping track of the testing and such. So while I recognize that they had to go back and redo the testing reporting multiple times, part because DOT lost it, part because DOT wanted it broken down into very specific sections rather than kind of a broad overview, it was still information that Wilson should have had. And so they did go back and review it, and did reduce their fees. Where we are right now is that we met in Albuquerque with DOT and Wilson late March. And Wilson, are putting together another package for DOT to hopefully get us over this hump that we have right now with DOT. So the DOT will be able to accept the project, and then we'll be able to close out the project. But that's where we're at right now, is that we can't close out the project because of some of this information that's lacking with DOT. But I think, like I said, we met with them in March, and we're getting that information together. So while I didn't feel that their original request was justified, I do feel comfortable with what they're requesting now on this project.
You said it was about 55 is what they came out first? I mean, thank goodness we have you to say something. They come back at 30. I mean...
Well, and part of this was that when they had a request also for the sewer alcohol line, and I had gone through and done an audit of their invoicing and had found some errors in their invoicing. Not that they had invoiced us correctly, but it was how they were tracking it on their side and applying it. They weren't doing it correctly. And so I explained to them I didn't think that was my job to do. And so they went back and reviewed and realized that they had made some errors and reduced their fees. But at the same time, I told them I just didn't think that it was our responsibility to pay them to meet the DOT standards for testing.
Mm-hmm.
That was their job as construction management.
Right.
So it's still $33,000 more than what we would like to pay. This funding source will be out of the legislative appropriation for the construction of the arterial. So in essence, we're reducing what we have available for phase 2 by $33,000 because it will be spent on phase 1B.
And of course, Mr. Mayor, of course, there's no way that we can bill DOT for the stuff that they lost. Wouldn't that be a good thing, to make them be accountable for what they lost? Anyway.
And that's through a change in personnel within their offices is what has happened. And I don't know what happened. It was just that they were not able to locate that if it was lost, an email shut down and all of that was lost. I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
I think you're going to get this expression quite a bit tonight from all of us.
That was the expression
it's
I
just,
had when I was going through all of this. It's just not anything I like to do, to ask for these types of funds. Moving forward, my request to any of the consultants would be, don't wait. As soon as you realize you're getting into a position where you're going to incur more fees, let's talk about it before you incur those fees.
Right.
So that's something that you can implement from the city standpoint and just add that as kind of a check and balance and as part of the contract and say, any additional fees basically need to be reviewed prior to. You don't write the check until you have permission to write the check.
Exactly.
In a manner of speaking. Okay. All right.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, that's kind of where we went back to making the engineers or contractors come before us when there was change orders, instead of just throwing it out there, and we wanted to know why it wasn't included in their bid or why it wasn't.
Kind of put them on the spot and make them explain themselves.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I thoroughly agree with that. It was due to
this
the
one's a little
length of time on
right.
this.
Right.
That this is staff that didn't bring this, that didn't follow up on this on a timely basis.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Does anybody else have any questions or comments on item B? Okay. So if there's no further questions, I would entertain a motion
Mayor, move to approve Wilson and Company's request for amendment of construction management fees for arterial Phase 1B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, one more.
And Leslie.
Item C. RFP 2015-0444 Wilson and Company Construction Management Services Agreement, Aztec Municipal Airport Amendment.
Again, this was issued, the agreement for the airport management services was issued under the RFP that we had awarded to Wilson. When the fees were negotiated with Wilson for the management of this project, they did not include for a full-time inspector up on that project. This is an FAA, again, it's a federal project. It's an airport project, which is so much more detailed, if you can believe it, than an FHWA-funded project. And it's just because of the sensitivity of the use of that airport. I mean, it's aircraft, and so it has to be built to a specific standard. And that standard even applies to the apron project. Same standards for that pavement apply to it that would apply to the runway. Not the same depth or such, but to the same degree of, to the design. So Wilson and Company's proposal initially just provided for a part-time inspector. During the course of the construction, Oldcastle was the contractor on the project. During the course of the excavation of a portion of the tarmac to be replaced, they came across some very unstable soil. The result is that there was significant effort put into determining what that engineered solution was to removing those soils and stabilizing it. And it took, we spent about 2 weeks between GeoMap looking at it and then the Wilson and Company looking at it to come up with a recommendation to the city. There was nothing within their original proposal to us that provided them any compensation for that additional effort. In addition to that, because of other events that were going up at the airport, we required them to have their inspector up there on a much more frequent basis than what was included in the proposal. So again, as much as it pains me, I do believe that their request is justified for the time that was spent into it. I think that part of it, when we negotiated the proposal, we weren't being realistic as to what the project was going to require. And so that may have caused Wilson to maybe submit a proposal that wasn't sufficient to begin with.
So I guess, I mean, this project's done, but
Correct.
How can we, I know it's a easy question for me to ask, maybe not so easy to answer, but how can we avoid, falling into that trap again, where we kind of lowball or underestimate or, best case scenario and run with it, which I think we can see just based on tonight, the best case scenario rarely actually occurs.
This one's a difficult one. I don't know if part of the negotiation was an attempt to try to reduce the cost of the project, and in the hopes that just doing the part-time inspection would be sufficient.
Right.
And it might have worked out that way if we hit some wet weather during the construction of the tarmac. We had some special events that were going on up at the airport that required the contractor to work some different hours than what had originally been anticipated, so that at least the event could proceed, even though the project wasn't finished. But the result, the flip side of that, was that meant that Wilson was having to rearrange their schedule, which then changed from what they had originally proposed. So we were trying, I think we were trying to accommodate a lot of different things on this project.
And there may be times you can't foresee those things, so
Right.
this sounds like this might be one of those.
And then, like I said, then the soils were horrible in the one spot, and just required a significant amount of effort in determining how to resolve it.
Any other questions, comments? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve Wilson and Company request for amendment of construction management fees for the Aztec Municipal Airport.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for RFP 2015-044 Wilson and Company Construction Management Services Agreement, Aztec Municipal Airport Amendment. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Moving on to city manager and commissioners and city attorney reports. Mr. Mueller?
I have no report, sir.
No report? Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner side?
I do. I will be attending Northwest New Mexico Seniors Meeting tomorrow in Blanco at the Blanco Senior Center. And then, let's see, next week is EDAB. And then I think the week after that is MPO. So a lot coming up here. And then I have been asked by Kim Carpenter, the CEO of San Juan County, to serve on the San Juan County comprehensive plan. They're redoing their 10-year plan for the county. So he has asked me to serve on that task force, and so I will be doing that. I also think we have another the task force for the safe communities. Is that
18th.
The 18th? Yes, I couldn't remember for sure. At the college again. So anyway, I think that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I attended the Four Corners Economic Development membership meeting last week, and they had a presentation on the New Mexico True, and what we noticed in that was a serious lack of coverage and marketing for the Four Corners area. And so there was some discussion about that, and that group is planning on dealing with that and seeing how we get in the marketing picture of New Mexico True, because we've got some incredible marketing, and we need to be a part of it. They did mention that national parks like Aztec Ruins wants control of what photographs are released, what information is released. And so a lot of that coverage is state parks, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos, as we've experienced. But this economic development group is very serious about paying attention to developing tourism in the Four Corners area, because we've got a lot of reasons for people to come here. Then I also attended a coffee meeting with Warren Unsicker and Tom Taylor that were reviewing what activities have been going on, and of course the focus on the closure of the power plant. One thing that came up, which was surprising, was that a company in China may be interested in purchasing the power plant and keeping it open. So that was an interesting discussion, and I'll be attending, more meetings to understand what is developing with the regional economic development interest. Also, we had a USDA webinar concerning broadband funding. That there's $3 million available for rural areas, but Aztec can't qualify because we have already have some excellent infrastructure and Wi-Fi in the area, but hopefully other rural areas will be able to tap into those funds and expand those services. So that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis?
As a matter of fact, I attended the San Juan Water Commission meeting last Wednesday. Sorry, my voice. It was interesting to reacquaint myself with the commission because I had worked with them many years ago, and naturally the first meeting I attend, we discussed the budget. So it was approved, now it's going to the county commission for final approval, I believe. It was interesting because Commissioner Jim Dunlap, who represents the Rural Water Users Association, I don't know why, I don't know. He saved a column that I wrote about water issues, and he passed it out, and I thought, oh no. Well, first of all, it was 15 years ago I wrote the column, and I'm thinking, oh, he really did save things. The worst part was he saved the photo that went with it, and I was younger. So, but it was a very good meeting. The water situation is not getting better, despite the nice rain we had the other day. I think at that time, Animus was floating at 29% of average at the state line, which is very dangerous. And the snowpack right at that time was 50% of normal up in the mountains. So it doesn't bode well for this coming year, so we're probably going to need to look at some of those things down the road. It was very informative. It was nice to be back on and interacting with that again.
And Commissioner Randall?
Yes, sir. Let's give a weekly fishing report. Tiger Park's very good again, but the trout, Game and Fish actually put in 1,300 10-inch trout last Tuesday and 150 16-inch trout. So we didn't get any of the 16-inchers, but white power bait seems to be doing. Rainbow power bait seems to be working really well, actually. They moved from green to rainbow now. But my other thing is kind of in that same area is Reservoir 1, and I know I've had other people that drive by and still see them. I know it's drying and stuff, but they just want reassurance with, the dry year we're having is, Commissioner Lewis said, is if we're going to have that available this summer or what kind of the plan is going forward with that.
We're moving to have that done by the end of July, end of June.
Okay.
Month off, sorry. They did the pre-bid meeting last week.
Perfect.
So it's in process to get that removed.
Very cool. Okay, yeah, I think we're really I need it, as we always do, but yeah. Anyway, all right, cool, that's just something that I've been asked a lot, so I wanted to bring that up and make sure that was working. I told them I'm sure it's taken care of, not to worry about it, but just want to make sure. So, and that is all.
Process.
Okay, I just have a couple of things. The first thing I wrote down as I was throughout the evening, I just want to encourage folks to attend either as a participant or as a fan, roadside, cheer on the folks for the ATOS Earth Day run on April 21st. I don't know the time. I'm going to guess 10 a.m., but it's available on the website. Come out and either participate, cheer folks on. It'll be a great day, and and enjoy the weekend, and encourage, which will hopefully encourage more events, and more people to get out and about as the weather warms up. I just want to kind of circle back around to Mr. Dunton that gave our invocation. I met him at Good Friday breakfast at Navajo Ministries on Good Friday, and I had a great talk with him. Enjoyed the breakfast, met some folks. There were some other civic leaders from the community, mainly Farmington, but it was nice to represent Aztec and to get to know Mr. Dunton and speak with him. And I was, the privilege of him, to come out and join us this evening. Chief's coffee is on the 17th, right, Chief?
Right.
The night before the task force at San Juan College. So I encourage folks either to come out to that, and I encourage you to bring a friend or two. Fill this up, because last time I kind of didn't realize until the last minute Carla was kind enough to come and grab me. But we had half of this table full, and I'd love to see this many or more at the next one. Great topics, talking about community safety, specifically school safety of late. And I encourage everybody to get involved or to pass the word on at least. If you can't come because of family issues or whatever, or family obligations, pass the word on and let people know. Put it on your Facebook page, and let people know, because sometimes it's just a little bit piece of communication that's missing, that folks want to be involved, but they're not quite sure how to plug into some of these things. So I think that could go a long way if we kind of crowdsource this a little bit. I did attend the ECHO board meeting. I was just a guest because I haven't officially been voted on the board at the time. I have been since. Interesting stuff. You know, they have a couple of legal issues that they have gotten taken care of recently that they just kind of did a little brief on. And I've since been over to the food bank, just coincidentally because my wife and I dropped some stuff off. And I still have plans to visit the preschool just across the street to talk to the folks that run that and see some of the little ones running around. So I'm looking forward to that. A little self-promotion here, our Aztec JROTC, which many of us know and I definitely love, are heading out next weekend to Denver. We do it about every other year. We're getting to do a color guard for the Colorado Rockies on national TV. The Cubs are going to be in town, so it's always a great time. We're taking the kids to the Natural Science Museum and, you know, just doing some other things. But the highlight is the color guard at the game, so I'm very excited about that. And one last thing, I promise I'll shut up. We can now go to 550 on Sundays and partake in an adult beverage if we want to. I think that's great news. So that's all I have. Mr. Thrower?
I have no report.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like
Yes,
to remind
ma'am.
everybody, you said the junior JROTC and our all of our spring athletes for our high school are all in full swing, and I think softball's into district play. I know baseball's into district, and right now headed toward the district championships. So go out and support our kids. Track is going in full swing too, so go out and support all of our kids.
Yeah, it's free. Get out there and well, not quite free. It's
But
cheap.
close.
It's very cheap.
But close. Thank you.
All right. With that, we move on to department reports. Any department heads have anything to report?
Mr. Mayor, City Commission, just to update you on our downtown MRA plan. So last week I was in Albuquerque, and fortunately I was able to stop by Consensus Planning. That is the firm that is doing our MRI study. They should have the draft by the end of end of April, possibly beginning of May. But I was able to see some of the renderings of our downtown, what it could look like, especially the right-of-way. They've incorporated a bike lane, a median. They're going to just show these as examples. It's not mean it's going to happen by any means, but just the potential or the possibilities. And so they did want to express that Aztec, both the elected officials and the community as a whole, there was very good participation. Actually, one of the best they've seen throughout the state. And so they just wanted to share that with the community.
Great. Thank you. I don't see any other department heads storming up. So our next item is we are moving into closed session pursuant to state law, section 10-15-1, paragraph H-7, pertaining to threatened or pending litigation in which the public body is or may become a participant. And this is Mayor Snover voting aye.
Commissioner Sipe voting aye.
Mayor Pro Tem voting aye.
Mr. Randall voting aye.
Commissioner Lewis voting aye.
So we are now going to enter a closed session.